I was 68 years old when my children thought they could pull one over on me. After raising 5 kids as a single mother, working 2 jobs for 30 years, and surviving more storms than I care to count, they honestly believed I wouldn't notice when they started planning to sell my house behind my back. The irony is, I probably would have laughed it off as another one of their well-meaning schemes if they hadn't made one crucial mistake. They assumed the house was actually mine to sell. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The whole mess started on a Tuesday morning in October when my eldest son Marcus showed up at my front door with that smile he's been using since he was 7 years old and broke my favorite vase. You know the one. Too bright, too eager, the kind that immediately makes you suspicious. He was holding a manila envelope and practically bouncing on his heels like he'd just won the lottery. "Mom, you're going to love this," he said, pushing past me into the living room of the little bungalow on Maple Street that had been home for the past 15 years. "Sarah and I have been working on something really special for you." Sarah, my second eldest, appeared behind him as if on cue. She had that same guilty expression, though she was trying to mask it with what she probably thought was excitement. Both of them were dressed nicer than usual. Marcus in a button-down shirt instead of his usual paint-stained work clothes, Sarah in a blazer that still had the tags tucked inside the sleeve. I could see the corner of one poking out. "What kind of something?" I asked, settling into my favorite armchair, the one with the faded floral pattern that all 5 kids had claimed was hideous, but somehow always ended up curled up in when they came to visit. Marcus opened the envelope with the kind of theatrical flourish he'd perfected in high school drama club. "We found a buyer for your house!" The words hung in the air between us, like smoke. I blinked at him, then at Sarah, then back at him. "A buyer for my house?" "I know it's a surprise," Sarah jumped in, her voice taking on that careful tone she used when she was about to deliver news she thought I wouldn't like. "But Marcus and I have been talking, and we think it's time. This place is getting too big for you, Mom. The yard work alone is too much, and the stairs to the basement are getting dangerous." I had lived in this house for 15 years. It wasn't big by any stretch of the imagination. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen that had seen better decades, and a living room that could barely fit all 5 kids when they came for holidays. The basement stairs were the same ones I'd been navigating just fine for a decade and a half. And the yard was a modest patch of grass with 2 oak trees and a flower bed I'd spent years perfecting. "Too big," I repeated. "This house is barely 1,200 square feet." Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "It's not about size, Mom. It's about practicality. You're not getting any younger, and maintaining a house is a lot of work. We found you a beautiful senior living community about 20 minutes away. The Sunny Meadows Retirement Village. They have activities, meal plans, housekeeping services." Retirement village. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You want to put me in a nursing home?" "It's not a nursing home," Sarah said quickly. "It's independent living. You'd have your own apartment, but with support when you need it. And the best part is, the buyer we found is willing to pay asking price. Cash offer. No inspections, no appraisals, no waiting around for financing to go through." I stared at them both. Marcus was pulling papers out of the envelope now, spreading them across my coffee table like he was dealing cards. Purchase agreements, property assessments, brochures for Sunny Meadows with pictures of smiling elderly people playing bingo and doing water aerobics. "When exactly did you decide to sell my house?" I asked. "We've been thinking about it for months, ever since your dizzy spell in June. Remember when you called Sarah because you felt fate? We realized that if something happened to you here alone, it could be hours before anyone found you." The dizzy spell. I had gotten lightheaded one afternoon while gardening in the heat and had the good sense to call someone. Apparently, this had been interpreted as evidence of my declining capabilities rather than responsible behavior. And you found a buyer without consulting me? We wanted to make sure we had everything lined up before we talked to you about it. We know how you are about change, Mom. We thought if we could present you with a complete plan, it would be easier for you to see how good this could be. How I am about change, as if reluctance to be railroaded into major life decisions by my adult children was some kind of personality flaw. "Who's the buyer?" I asked. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a glance. "It's actually someone we know," Marcus said. "Remember Tom Henderson? He used to date Sarah in high school. He's a real estate investor now, and when we mentioned that we were thinking about helping you downsize, he said he'd be interested in making an offer." Tom Henderson. I remembered him vaguely. A lanky kid with acne who used to hang around our old house when Sarah was 16. He'd been polite enough, but I'd always gotten the impression he was more interested in what our family might be able to do for him than in Sarah herself. Apparently, much had not changed. "So Tom Henderson wants to buy my house," I said slowly, "for asking price, cash, no questions asked." "Exactly!" Marcus beamed like he'd just solved world hunger. "Isn't that perfect? It keeps everything in the community, so to speak. Tom knows the neighborhood, he knows the house has been well maintained, and he's ready to close quickly so you can get settled in your new place before the holidays." I looked down at the papers scattered across my coffee table. The purchase agreement had my name typed in the seller field and Tom Henderson's name as the buyer. The price was listed as $285,000, which was probably close to fair market value for the neighborhood. The proposed closing date was December 1st, just over a month away. What struck me most, though, was how official everything looked. These weren't preliminary documents or rough drafts. These were polished, professional contracts with signatures lines and notary acknowledgments. Marcus and Sarah hadn't just been thinking about selling my house, they'd been actively planning it. "You've put a lot of work into this," I observed. "We want what's best for you, Mom," Sarah said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "We know it seems sudden, but sometimes the best opportunities come when you least expect them. Tom is willing to let you take your time moving out, and the community at Sunny Meadows has a waiting list. If we don't act now, you might have to wait months for another opening." The waiting list, the urgency, the cash offer from someone who conveniently knew our family. The more they talked, the more the whole thing sounded rehearsed. "I need some time to think about this," I said finally. Marcus's smile faltered slightly. "Of course, but don't take too long, okay? Tom needs an answer by Friday if he's going to move forward with the financing arrangements." "I thought you said it was a cash offer." "It is, but even cash buyers have to arrange transfers and make sure everything is in order," Sarah said quickly. "These things move fast in real estate." After they left, I sat in my living room staring at the papers they'd left behind. The house was quiet in the way it only got on weekday afternoons when the neighbors were at work and the elementary school kids hadn't been released yet. Sunlight streamed through the windows, highlighting dust motes floating in the air and illuminating the framed photographs that covered every available surface. Pictures of birthday parties and graduations, holiday dinners and family vacations. 5 kids growing up in frames scattered throughout a house that Marcus and Sarah had decided was too big for one old woman. The irony wasn't lost on me that they wanted to sell a house where I'd raised them alone after their father walked out, claiming I couldn't handle the responsibility. I had been 28 when David left. Marcus was 8, Sarah was 6, the twins Jake and Emma were 4, and baby Lily was barely 2 years old. He'd taken the car, the savings account, and what was left of my trust in people who claimed to love me. What he'd left behind was a mortgage I couldn't afford, 5 kids who didn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home, and a determination to prove that I could handle whatever life threw at me. The house on Maple Street wasn't the house where I'd raised them. That had been a larger place on the other side of town, with 4 bedrooms and a big backyard where the kids could run around. I'd lost that house in the divorce settlement, along with most of everything else.
This little bungalow had been my fresh start, the place I'd bought 15 years ago when Lily graduated from high school, and I finally had some breathing room in my budget. I loved this house from the moment I first walked through it. It was small, but well built, with original hardwood floors and built-in bookcases that reminded me of the homes I dreamed about as a child. The kitchen was tiny but efficient, with a window over the sink that looked out onto the backyard where I'd planted tomatoes and herbs and flowers that bloomed from spring through fall. This was the house where I'd hosted family dinners when the kids came back from college, where I'd stayed up all night with Lily when she had her heart broken for the first time, where I'd celebrated Marcus's engagement and Sarah's promotion and Jake's return from deployment, where Emma had told me she was pregnant with my first grandchild, and where I'd babysit that same grandchild dozens of times over the past 3 years. This house represented independence, stability, and 15 years of building a life that was entirely my own. And Marcus and Sarah thought they could sell it out from under me because I'd gotten dizzy in the heat one time? I picked up the purchase agreement and read through it more carefully. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out at me. Seller agrees to provide clear title free of liens or encumbrances. Property to be sold in as-is condition. Buyer waives right to inspection contingent upon seller's representation of property condition. Tom Henderson was awfully confident about buying a house sight unseen. Or maybe he wasn't buying it sight unseen. Maybe he'd already been through it, guided by my children who thought they knew what was best for me. I was still staring at the papers when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Emma's number, my youngest daughter calling from her office downtown where she worked as a paralegal. "Hey, Mom," and I could hear the careful tone that all my kids seemed to be using with me lately. "Marcus told me about the house news. That's so exciting." "Is it?" "Well, yeah. I mean, Tom Henderson is offering asking price, and you know how crazy the real estate market has been lately. Plus, Sunny Meadows is supposed to be really nice. My friend Katie's grandmother lives there and she loves it." So Emma was in on it too? "How long have you all been planning this?" "Planning what?" "Don't play dumb with me, Emma. How long have Marcus and Sarah been working on selling my house, and how many of my children knew about it before I did?" Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, we're worried about you. You're living alone in that house, and it's a lot of maintenance. We just want to make sure you're safe and taken care of." "I'm 68 years old, not 98.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself in my house. I know you are, but what if something happens? What if you fall or have a medical emergency? It could be hours before anyone finds you. The same argument Marcus had used. They'd definitely been coordinating their approach. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Do you think I'm incompetent? Of course not, Mom. You're one of the strongest people I know. Then why are you all treating me like I can't make my own decisions about where I want to live? We're not treating you like anything. We just want to help. Helping would be asking me what I want instead of presenting me with contracts that have already been drawn up. Emma sighed. Look, Mom, I know this feels sudden, but sometimes opportunities come along that you have to grab quickly. Tom Henderson is a serious buyer, and the housing market could change at any time. If you wait too long, you might not get another offer this good. After I hung up with Emma, I called Jake. My conversation with him followed the same pattern. Careful concern, rehearsed arguments about my safety, and barely concealed frustration when I didn't immediately embrace their plan. By the time I talked to Lily, I was starting to feel like I was trapped in some kind of elaborate intervention. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and tried to make sense of what was happening. 5 children who I'd raised to be independent thinkers had somehow decided collectively that I was no longer capable of independence myself. They'd found a buyer, researched housing alternatives, drawn up contracts, and coordinated their arguments, all without consulting me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not just angry, hurt.
These were the kids I'd sacrificed for, worked double shifts for, gone without things I wanted so they could have what they needed. I'd taught them to stand up for themselves, to question authority, to never let anyone make important decisions for them. And now they were trying to steamroll me into the biggest decision I'd face in years. I was still fuming when I remembered something that made me stop cold. 15 years ago, when I bought this house, I'd been so paranoid about losing another home that I'd done something unusual with the deed, something my children apparently didn't know about. I went to my bedroom and pulled out the fireproof box where I kept all my important documents: birth certificates, insurance policies, my will, and the deed to the house. I spread the deed out on my bed and read through it carefully, looking for the details I'd almost forgotten about. There it was, in the legal description section. The house on Maple Street wasn't owned by me alone. It was owned jointly by me and the Riverside Community Land Trust, a nonprofit organization I discovered while researching affordable housing options after my divorce. The arrangement was unusual, but not unheard of. I'd purchased the house through the Land Trust program, which meant I owned the building, but the Land Trust owned the land underneath it. The setup had allowed me to buy the house for significantly less than market value, with the understanding that if I ever sold, the Land Trust would have first right of refusal and would share in any appreciation of the property. More importantly for my current situation, the deed specifically stated that any sale of the property required approval from both parties, me and the Riverside Community Land Trust Board. I couldn't sell the house without their consent, and they couldn't sell it without mine. Marcus and Sarah had drawn up a purchase agreement for a house I couldn't legally sell on my own, for a buyer who probably had no idea about the land trust arrangement. Tom Henderson was planning to buy a property with complicated ownership structure, and my children were planning to sell something they didn't understand. For the first time in days, I smiled. The next morning, I called the Riverside Community Land Trust office and spoke with Maria Santos, the program director I'd worked with when I originally bought the house. She remembered me and was happy to explain how the current arrangement worked. Any sale would need to go through our board approval process, she confirmed. We'd need to review the proposed buyer, the sale price, and make sure everything aligns with our mission to maintain affordable housing in the community. The process usually takes about 60 days. And what if the current sale price is significantly above what I originally paid? Then we'd be entitled to a portion of the appreciation, usually about 30%. It's all outlined in your original agreement. I asked her to send me copies of all the relevant documents, including the current procedures for property sales. She promised to email everything within the hour. When Marcus called that afternoon to check on my decision, I was ready for him. I've been thinking about the offer, and I think there might be some complications you're not aware of. What kind of complications? Well, for starters, I can't actually sell the house without permission from the Riverside Community Land Trust. Silence. What land trust? The one that co-owns the property with me. I bought the house through their affordable housing program 15 years ago. Any sale has to be approved by their board, and they're entitled to a share of any appreciation and value. More silence. Mom, what are you talking about? Your name is on the deed. I checked. My name is on the deed, along with the land trust. Did you actually read the whole deed, Marcus, or just the part with my name on it? I could hear papers rustling in the background. I'm looking at it right now, and it says Margaret Rose Sullivan. That's you. Keep reading, the legal description section. More paper rustling, then a sharp intake of breath. Joint ownership with Riverside Community Land Trust, subject to terms and conditions outlined in attached covenant. There you go.
Mom, why didn't you tell us about this? You didn't ask. You presented me with a done deal and expected me to sign on the dotted line. If you'd included me in your planning from the beginning, I could have explained the ownership situation. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What does this mean for the sale? It means Tom Henderson needs to understand what he's actually buying, and you need to understand what you're actually selling. The Land Trust Board meets monthly, and any sale proposal needs to be submitted at least 30 days in advance.
Their next meeting that could consider a sale wouldn't be until January. January? But Tom needs an answer by Friday. Then Tom is going to be disappointed. That evening, Sarah called. Then Emma, then Jake, then Lily. Each conversation followed the same pattern: initial disbelief, followed by accusations that I was being deliberately difficult, followed by resigned acceptance that their timeline had just been completely derailed. The most interesting call came from Tom Henderson himself. "Mrs. Sullivan, I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Marcus gave me your number and suggested I reach out to discuss the property sale." His voice was smoother than I remembered from his teenage years, with the practiced confidence of someone who made his living convincing people to do things they weren't sure about. "I don't mind at all, Tom, though I understand there might be some confusion about what exactly is for sale." "Right. Marcus mentioned something about a land trust situation. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with how those arrangements work." "It's pretty straightforward. I own the house, the land trust owns the land, and any sale requires approval from both parties. The land trust also gets a percentage of any appreciation in value." "What kind of percentage are we talking about?" "According to my original agreement, about 30% of the appreciation above my original purchase price." I could hear him calculating. If he was offering $285,000 for a house I'd bought for $180,000 15 years ago, the land trust would be entitled to about $31,500 of his purchase price. "That's significant," he said finally. "It's how the program works. It keeps housing affordable for the next buyer while still allowing the original owner to benefit from some appreciation." "And this sale approval process, how long does that typically take?" "A couple of months, minimum. The Land Trust Board needs time to review the application, verify that the buyer meets their criteria, and make sure the sale price is fair market value." Another pause. "Mrs. Sullivan, can I ask you something? Are you actually interested in selling, or are you just trying to get out of this deal?" The question surprised me with its directness. "Why do you ask?" "Because your kids seem to think this sale is in your best interest, but you don't sound particularly enthusiastic about it." I found myself liking Tom Henderson more than I'd expected to. "My children have decided what's best for me without consulting me about what I actually want." "And what do you actually want?" "I want to stay in my house." "Then why are we having this conversation?" "Because my kids think I'm too old and frail to live independently, and they've decided to solve that problem by selling my house and moving me into a retirement community." Tom laughed, not unkindly. "Mrs. Sullivan, I've been in real estate for 15 years and I've seen a lot of family situations. If you don't want to sell your house, don't sell your house. Your kids mean well, but it's your decision to make." "They seem to think it's already been decided." "Well, it hasn't. And frankly, after learning about the land trust situation, I'm not sure this is the right investment for me anyway. I was expecting a straightforward purchase, not a complicated approval process with a third party taking a cut of the profits." After I hung up with Tom, I sat in my living room feeling both relieved and vindicated. The buyer my children had been so excited about had just walked away from the deal, which meant their carefully orchestrated plan was falling apart. But I also realized that this was just the beginning. Marcus and Sarah weren't going to give up easily, and the other kids were clearly invested in the idea that I needed to be taken care of. I was going to need more than just the land trust technicality to convince them that I was perfectly capable of managing my own life. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to my part-time job at the library, a job I'd taken not because I needed the money, but because I enjoyed helping people research things and staying connected to the community. Then I drove downtown to the offices of Peterson, Hayes & Associates, the law firm where Emma worked. I didn't call ahead. I just walked into the reception area and asked to speak with Emma Sullivan. "Mom?" Emma appeared in the lobby, looking surprised and slightly alarmed. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine. I need to talk to someone about property law, and I figured you might be able to point me in the right direction."
Emma glanced around the reception area nervously. Okay, let me see if anyone's available. She disappeared for a few minutes, then returned with a woman about her age wearing a sharp business suit and a curious expression. Mom, this is Claire Peterson, one of the partners here. Claire, this is my mother, Margaret Sullivan. Claire Peterson shook my hand with the kind of firm grip that suggested she didn't suffer fools gladly. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Sullivan. Emma says you have some questions about property law? I do. I own a house jointly with a community land trust, and my children are trying to sell it without understanding the ownership structure. I need to know what my rights are. Claire's eyebrows rose slightly. That's an interesting situation. Why don't we talk in my office? Emma started to follow us, but Claire held up a hand. I think this might be better as a private consultation, Emma. Attorney-client privilege and all that. In Claire's office, I explained the situation as clearly as I could. The land trust arrangement, my children's surprise sale plan, Tom Henderson's offer and subsequent withdrawal, and my desire to remain in my home. Claire listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Mrs. Sullivan, you're in a very strong position legally. The land trust ownership means your children have no standing to sell the property without your consent and the consent of the land trust board. Even if you wanted to sell, which you clearly don't, the process would take months and involve significant oversight. What if they keep pressuring me? Then you document everything. Keep records of all conversations, save all emails and text messages, and make it clear in writing that you do not consent to any sale of your property. If they continue to pursue it against your wishes, you could have grounds for a harassment complaint. Claire pulled out a business card and handed it to me. I'm going to recommend that you send a formal letter to your children explaining your position and outlining the legal realities of the land trust ownership. Would you like me to draft something for you? An hour later, I walked out of Peterson, Hayes & Associates with a professionally drafted letter that made my position crystal clear. The letter explained the land trust ownership structure, stated unequivocally that I did not consent to selling my home, and warned that any attempts to proceed with a sale without my consent could result in legal action. Emma was waiting by the elevator when I came out of Claire's office. Mom, what was that about? I'm protecting my interests, honey, something I apparently need to do since my own children seem to think they can make major decisions about my life without consulting me. We're trying to help you. No, you're trying to control me. There's a difference. That evening, I emailed the letter to all 5 of my children. Then I sat back and waited for the phone calls. They started within the hour. Marcus called first, his voice tight with frustration. Mom, I just read your email. What's this about legal action? We're your children, not criminals. You're my children who tried to sell my house without my permission, I replied, settling into my armchair with a cup of tea. The legal action warning is there to make sure you understand that I'm serious about staying in my home. But Mom, the land trust thing, why didn't you ever mention it to us? We've been planning this for months. Maybe because you never asked me about my wishes before you started making plans. If you'd had an actual conversation with me instead of presenting me with a done deal, I could have explained a lot of things. Sarah called 20 minutes later, and her approach was different. Instead of anger, she led with hurt feelings. Mom, I can't believe you went to a lawyer. Don't you trust us? Don't you know that everything we're doing is because we love you? I know you love me, sweetheart, but love doesn't give you the right to make major life decisions for me. We just want you to be safe. I'm safe. I'm safe in my own house, living my own life, making my own choices. What's not safe is having my children conspire behind my back to uproot everything I've built. Emma's call came an hour later, and her tone was purely professional. Mom, Claire Peterson told me she drafted that letter for you. I have to say, I'm disappointed that you didn't feel like you could talk to me about this directly. Emma, you work for a law firm. You know better than anyone that when people are trying to take actions that affect your legal interests, you get proper representation. We're not trying to take anything from you. You're trying to take my home. You're trying to take my independence. You're trying to take my right to decide where and how I want to live. What would you call that?
Jake's call was the shortest. He was deployed overseas again and the connection was poor, but his message was clear. Mom, I don't understand what's going on, but if you don't want to sell the house, don't sell the house.
You raised us to stand up for ourselves. Maybe it's time we remembered that lesson applies to you, too. Lily didn't call at all that night, which surprised me. She was usually the first to jump into family drama with both feet, trying to mediate between everyone else's positions. Her silence felt ominous. The next morning, I woke up to find 3 cars parked in my driveway. Marcus's work truck, Sarah's sedan, and Lily's compact car. They were staging some kind of intervention, and I hadn't even had my coffee yet. I took my time getting dressed, brushing my teeth, and starting a pot of coffee. Let them wait. They were the ones who had shown up uninvited at 7:30 in the morning. When I finally opened the front door, all 3 of them were sitting on my porch steps, looking like a delegation of concerned relatives. Marcus stood up first, holding another manila envelope. Mom, we need to talk. Good morning to you too. Would you like some coffee? We're serious about this, Sarah said, not moving from her spot on the steps. We can't just pretend everything is normal after yesterday. Everything is normal. I'm living in my house, which is what I've been doing for 15 years. The only thing that's changed is that you've decided it's a problem. Lily finally spoke up. Mom, can we please just come inside and have a conversation like adults? I stepped aside and let them file into my living room. Marcus immediately started spreading papers across my coffee table again. Different papers this time, with official-looking letterheads and legal seals. We've been doing some research of our own, he announced, about this land trust situation. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down. And what did you discover? Sarah pulled out a printed email. We contacted the Riverside Community Land Trust directly, spoke with Maria Santos, the director. She confirmed that you do have a joint ownership arrangement, but she also said something interesting, which was that the land trust is actually struggling financially. They've had to sell off several properties in the past 2 years to stay operational, and they're actively encouraging current homeowners to consider selling so they can reinvest the proceeds in new affordable housing projects. I sipped my coffee. That's interesting, but it doesn't change anything. They still can't force me to sell, and I still don't want to. Marcus leaned forward. But Mom, don't you see? This could be a win-win situation. You get to sell the house, move somewhere safer and more manageable, and the land trust gets the funding they need to help other families. A win-win situation for everyone except me, you mean? Lily pulled out another document. We also talked to someone at Sunny Meadows. They have immediate availability in their independent living section, and they're willing to hold a unit for you for 30 days while we work out the details. How generous of them. Mom, please, Sarah said, and her voice was getting that strained quality it took on when she was trying very hard not to lose her temper. We're trying to help you plan for the future. What happens if you fall and break a hip? What happens if you have a stroke or develop dementia? This house isn't equipped for any of those possibilities. What happens if I don't fall and break a hip? What happens if I don't have a stroke or develop dementia? What happens if I live another 20 years in perfect health and you force me to give up the home I love for problems that never materialize? Marcus opened the manila envelope and pulled out more papers. We also got these. Estimates from contractors for the work this house is going to need in the next few years. New roof, foundation repairs, updated electrical system, HVAC replacement. We're talking about probably $60,000 in maintenance costs over the next 5 years. I looked at the estimates. They were detailed and professional from contractors I recognized around town. When did you have contractors come look at my house? Last month, Sarah admitted, when you were at your book club meeting. We wanted to get a realistic picture of what you'd be facing in terms of upkeep costs. You had strangers in my house without my permission. They weren't strangers, they were licensed contractors, and we were trying to be helpful. By violating my privacy and gathering information to use against me, Lily stood up and walked to the window overlooking my backyard. Mom, look at this place objectively. The paint is peeling on the back deck. The gutters are pulling away from the house. There are tree branches hanging over the roof that need to be trimmed. The flower beds are overgrown. This house needs work, and it's only going to need more work as time goes on. I joined her at the window. My backyard looked like what it was, a space that had been lovingly maintained by someone who enjoyed gardening but wasn't obsessed with perfection. The paint on the deck was indeed peeling, but the structure was sound. The gutters had pulled away slightly on one side, but they still functioned fine. The tree branches provided shade and hadn't damaged anything. The flower beds were full and lush, not overgrown. Lily, this house is in good condition for a 15-year-old property. Everything you're pointing out is normal maintenance, not evidence that I'm incapable of homeownership. But why should you have to deal with normal maintenance at your age? Wouldn't it be easier to let someone else handle those headaches while you focus on enjoying your retirement? I turned away from the window. You know what I find most interesting about this whole conversation? Not one of you has asked me what I want to do with my retirement. You've decided I should be playing bingo and doing water aerobics, but you haven't asked me if that's how I want to spend my time. Marcus gathered up his papers. Okay, Mom, what do you want to do with your retirement? I want to keep working at the library because I enjoy helping people research things and I like staying connected to the community. I want to keep volunteering at the literacy center because teaching adults to read is rewarding work. I want to keep gardening because growing things makes me happy. I want to keep hosting family dinners because I love having all of you and the grandchildren in my kitchen. And I want to do all of those things from this house because this is where I belong. Sarah sighed. But Mom, what if something happens to you? What if you need help? Then I'll ask for help. I'll hire help if I need to. I'll make whatever adjustments are necessary when they become necessary, not years in advance based on problems that might never happen. And what if you can't afford to hire help? What if the house repairs are more expensive than you anticipated? What if your health insurance doesn't cover everything you need? I sat back down and looked at my 3 children, all of them earnest and worried and completely convinced they knew better than I did what my life should look like. Let me tell you something about being 68 years old, I said. I've survived a lot of things I didn't think I could survive. I raised 5 children as a single mother. I worked 2 jobs for years to keep us afloat. I lost my first house in a divorce and bounced back. I've dealt with sick kids, financial crises, family emergencies, and every kind of challenge you can imagine. I've been making decisions and solving problems for 50 years, and I've gotten pretty good at it. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. We know you're capable, Mom, but you shouldn't have to handle everything alone anymore. I'm not handling everything alone. I have friends, neighbors, a community. I have professional relationships with doctors, contractors, financial advisors. I have resources and connections you don't even know about because you've never bothered to ask about my life beyond whether I'm eating properly and taking my medications. Sarah came back from the window and sat down across from me. Tell us about your life, then. Help us understand why this house is so important to you. For a moment, I considered it. I could tell them about the morning ritual of coffee by the kitchen window, watching the neighborhood wake up, about the satisfaction of seeing my tomatoes ripen, or the pride I felt when visitors admired the built-in bookcases I'd filled with treasures from library sales and estate auctions, about the sense of accomplishment that came from handling my own repairs and maintenance, proving to myself again and again that I was still competent and independent. But I realized that if they could understand those things, we wouldn't be having this conversation in the first place. The house is important to me because it's mine, I said simply. I chose it. I bought it. I've maintained it. I've made it into a home that reflects who I am and what I value. You want to take that away from me and replace it with a generic apartment in a facility designed for old people who can't take care of themselves. You want to reduce my entire existence to safety and convenience, as if those are the only things that matter once you reach a certain age. Sarah looked like she was about to cry. We just love you so much, and we worry about you. I know you do, but love doesn't mean making decisions for someone else. Love means respecting their choices, even when you don't agree with them. After they left, I called Maria Santos at the Land Trust office.
I wanted to verify what Marcus and Sarah had told me about the organization's financial struggles. Mrs. Sullivan, it's good to hear from you again. I heard you might be considering a sale. Actually, I'm not considering a sale at all. My children contacted you without my knowledge or permission, and I want to make sure you understand that I have no intention of selling my home. There was a pause. I see. Well, that's certainly your right, though I should mention that we are actively encouraging our homeowners to consider their options. The real estate market is very strong right now, and it might be a good time to realize some gains. Are you having financial difficulties? Another pause, longer this time. We're facing some challenges, yes. The affordable housing market has become very competitive, and our funding sources have been reduced. We're having to make some strategic decisions about our property portfolio. What kind of strategic decisions? Well, in some cases, we're choosing not to exercise our right of first refusal when properties come up for sale. We're allowing them to go to market so we can use our share of the proceeds to fund new projects in areas where housing costs are lower.
This was interesting. So if I did decide to sell, you might not want to buy the property yourselves. It would depend on the circumstances. If you were selling to move to another affordable housing situation, we'd certainly consider it. But if you were selling simply to realize a profit, we'd probably prefer to take our percentage and invest it elsewhere. And if I don't sell at all, then nothing changes. You continue living in your home under the same arrangement we've had for 15 years. After I hung up, I felt more confident about my position. The land trust wasn't pressuring me to sell. They were simply responding to inquiries from my children. Maria Santos had made it clear that I had no obligation to consider selling, and that the trust would continue honoring our arrangement indefinitely. That afternoon, I decided to take a walk through my neighborhood. I wanted to remind myself why I loved living here, and I wanted to see the area through the eyes of someone who might be considering leaving it. Maple Street was quiet on a Thursday afternoon. Most of the neighbors were at work, but I could see signs of life everywhere. Children's toys in front yards, garden tools left on porches, cars in driveways that suggested people coming and going on normal daily business. It was a working neighborhood, not fancy, but well-maintained, full of people who cared about their properties and looked out for each other. Mrs. Chen was in her front yard pulling weeds from her flower bed. She waved when she saw me walking by. "Margaret, how are you doing?" I stopped at her fence. Mrs. Chen was probably 10 years older than me, a tiny woman who had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone else I knew. "I'm doing well, thanks. How about you?" "Oh, can't complain. Though I heard some rumors that you might be moving away. Please tell me that's not true." Word traveled fast in small neighborhoods. "Where did you hear that?" "My grandson saw some real estate people looking at your house last week. He works for one of the contractors in town, said they were taking measurements and making notes." The contractors Marcus and Sarah had brought in without my permission. "I'm not moving anywhere, Mrs. Chen. My children have some ideas about what's best for me, but I'm perfectly happy right where I am." She smiled. "Good. This neighborhood needs people like you. Too many of the old-timers are moving away, and all these young families moving in don't know anything about community." I continued my walk, thinking about Mrs. Chen's comment. She was right that the neighborhood had changed over the years. When I'd first moved in, most of the residents were middle-aged or older, people who had lived in their houses for decades. Now there were more young families, people who moved in and out every few years as their circumstances changed. But that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. The young families brought energy and new perspectives. They organized block parties and neighborhood cleanups. They started community gardens and pushed for better street lighting. They made the neighborhood feel alive in ways that hadn't when everyone was older and more settled. I was still thinking about community and change when I got home and found a car I didn't recognize parked in my driveway. A silver sedan with rental plates and a woman in a business suit sitting behind the wheel, talking on her phone. She got out when she saw me approaching. "Mrs. Sullivan,
I'm Patricia Morse from Sunny Meadows Retirement Village. I was hoping we could chat about your housing situation. Patricia Morse was probably in her 50s, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that suggested she spent a lot of time selling things to people. Her smile was professional but warm, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who was used to getting what she wanted. I'm sorry, but I didn't request any information about retirement communities. I know, but your children did. They're very concerned about your well-being, and they asked me to stop by and explain some of the benefits of our independent living program. My children asked you to come to my house without checking with me first? Her smile faltered slightly. Well, they mentioned that you might be resistant to the idea initially, but they thought if you heard directly from me about what we offer, you might be more open to considering it. Ms. Morse, I appreciate you taking the time to drive out here, but I'm not interested in moving to a retirement community. My children are going to have to accept that this is my decision to make. Of course it's your decision, but would you mind if I just took a few minutes to explain what we offer? I think you might be surprised by how different modern senior living is from what you might be imagining. Against my better judgment, I let her come inside. Patricia Morse had done her homework. She knew that I had worked as a librarian, that I enjoyed gardening, that I had 5 children and several grandchildren. She knew about my volunteer work at the Literacy Center and my involvement in the local book club. We have an excellent library at Sunny Meadows, she said, spreading brochures across my coffee table in the same space where Marcus had laid out his purchase agreements. And we have community gardens where residents can have their own plots. We also have a very active volunteer program that connects with local organizations. The brochures showed smiling elderly people engaged in various activities. They looked healthy and happy, but they also looked generic, like stock photo models chosen to represent an idealized version of aging. Mrs. Morse, these all sound like wonderful amenities, but I already have access to a library, I already have a garden, and I already volunteer in the community. Why would I give up things I own and control to pay rent for similar things that someone else controls? Well, there's the convenience factor. No maintenance responsibilities, no worrying about repairs or yard work, no concerns about safety or medical emergencies, but also no autonomy, no privacy, no ability to make changes or improvements, no sense of ownership or investment in my living space. Patricia smiled the kind of smile that suggested she'd heard these objections before. Miss Sullivan, I've worked in senior living for 20 years, and I've seen so many people who waited too long to make the transition. They held on to their homes until a crisis forced them to make a quick decision, usually to a nursing home rather than independent living. The people who are happiest with senior living are the ones who choose it while they're still healthy and capable. And the people who are happiest staying in their homes are the ones who don't let other people convince them that aging means giving up everything they value. Patricia packed up her brochures. Well, I can see you're not ready to consider this option right now, but I want you to know that we'll hold a unit for you for 30 days if you change your mind. And, Mrs. Sullivan, your children really are just trying to look out for you. I see this kind of family dynamic all the time, and it comes from a place of love. I'm sure it does, but love and control aren't the same thing. That evening, I made a decision that had been building all week. I called a family meeting, but this time I was going to control the agenda and the timing. I sent an email to all 5 children asking them to come to dinner on Sunday, and I specifically requested that they not bring spouses or grandchildren. I wanted to have this conversation without an audience. Then I spent the weekend preparing. Not just cooking, I was making a case, and I wanted to have all my evidence organized. I pulled out photo albums from my 15 years in the house, showing all the improvements I'd made, all the family gatherings we'd hosted, all the memories we'd created in these rooms. I gathered documentation of my financial situation, my health records, my social connections, and my community involvement. I wanted to show them that I wasn't a fragile old woman clinging to a house I couldn't maintain. I was a competent adult who had made a thoughtful choice about where and how I wanted to live.
I also did something I'd been putting off for years. I wrote down my wishes for end-of-life care, my thoughts about inheritance and estate planning, and my preferences for how I wanted decisions to be made if I ever did become incapacitated. I realized that part of my children's anxiety came from uncertainty about what I wanted, and I needed to give them clear guidance instead of leaving them to guess. Sunday afternoon, all 5 kids arrived within 15 minutes of each other, as if they'd coordinated their timing. Jake had driven up from Columbus, where he was stationed between deployments. Emma came directly from her office, still in her work clothes. Marcus, Sarah, and Lily arrived together, having clearly discussed strategy beforehand. I had made pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, and apple pie. Comfort food designed to remind everyone that this was still their mother's house, their family table, their safe place to be honest with each other. "Before we eat," I announced, "we're going to have the conversation we should have had weeks ago. You're all going to tell me exactly what you're worried about, and I'm going to explain exactly what my plans are. Then, we're going to figure out how to move forward as a family." Marcus looked around the table. "Mom, we've already told you what we're worried about." "No, you've told me what you think the solutions should be. You haven't told me what the actual problems are that have you so concerned." Sarah took a breath. "Okay, I'm worried that you're isolated here. You spend too much time alone, and if something happened to you, we might not find out for days. I'm worried about the house becoming too much for you to handle, not just financially, but physically. What if you can't manage the stairs to the basement anymore, or you can't reach high shelves, or the yard work becomes too demanding?" Emma spoke next. "I'm worried about your safety. This isn't the safest neighborhood anymore, and you're here alone at night with no security system, no emergency alert system, no way to call for help if you couldn't get to a phone." Lily was more direct. "I'm worried that you're being stubborn about this because you think accepting help means admitting defeat. I think you'd actually be happier in a place designed for seniors, but you won't consider it because of pride." Jake, who had been quiet through the earlier conversations, was the last to speak. "I'm worried that we're all so focused on managing your life that we've forgotten to ask what would make you happy. And I'm worried that this whole thing is going to tear our family apart." I looked around the table at these 5 adults who had once been small children, climbing into my bed during thunderstorms, asking me to fix their broken toys and heal their hurt feelings. They were still trying to protect me, but they'd forgotten that I protected them first. Thank you for being honest. Now let me be honest with you. I understand your concerns, and some of them are legitimate things we should discuss. But before we talk about solutions, I need you to understand something fundamental. I am not failing. I am not declining. I am not becoming incapable. I am a 68-year-old woman who has successfully managed her own life for decades, and nothing about that has changed. I stood up and walked to the sideboard where I'd arranged my documentation. "Sarah, you're worried about me being isolated. Let me show you what my week looks like." I pulled out a calendar marked with appointments and activities. Monday, I work at the library. Tuesday, I volunteer at the literacy center. Wednesday is book club at the community center. Thursday, I have coffee with Helen Rodriguez from down the street. Friday, I work at the library again. Saturday, I do errands and household tasks. Sunday, I usually see at least one of you or the grandchildren. I sat back down. That's not isolation. That's an active social life with people who share my interests and respect my independence. Marcus shifted in his chair. "But Mom, what about medical emergencies? What if you fell in the shower or had a heart attack?" Then the same thing would happen that would happen to any adult living alone. Either I'd be able to call for help or someone would check on me when I didn't show up where I was expected to be. Helen and I have an informal system where we check on each other if we don't see signs of activity at each other's houses. The library calls if I don't show up for work. Mrs. Chen notices if I don't bring in my newspaper. I pulled out another folder. "But since you're concerned about medical emergencies, I've done something I should have done years ago. I've written down all my preferences for medical care, end-of-life decisions, and financial management if I ever become incapacitated." Emma leaned forward. "You've updated your advance directives?" I've done more than that. I've created a complete plan for aging in place, including modifications I might need to make to the house, services I might need to hire, and at what point I would consider moving to assisted care. I've researched costs, identified resources, and made realistic assessments of my financial situation. I spread the documents across the table. Financial statements showing I had more savings than they'd realized, research on home modification services, contact information for senior support organizations, and a detailed healthcare proxy that designated Jake as my primary decision maker with Emma as backup. Jake gets primary medical decision-making because he's the only one of you who's ever asked me what I want instead of telling me what I should do, I explained. Emma gets backup because she understands legal documents and won't let emotions override my written instructions. Sarah looked hurt. What about the rest of us? The rest of you get consulted, but Jake makes the final decisions based on what I've told him I want. That way, if I ever am incapacitated, you won't have to guess what I would have chosen. Lily picked up the home modification research. What kind of modifications are you thinking about? Eventually, I might need grab bars in the bathroom, a stair lift to the basement, or a ramp instead of the front steps. I might need to hire housekeeping help or lawn care services. I might need grocery delivery or transportation assistance. But those are all things I can arrange when and if I need them, not things I need to plan for 10 years in advance. Marcus studied the financial documents. Mom, I had no idea you had this much in savings. Because you never asked about my finances. You assumed that because I live modestly and work part-time, I must be struggling financially. But I've been saving money for 50 years. I own my house outright, except for the land trust arrangement, and I have excellent health insurance and a good pension from the school district where I worked before you kids were born. Jake looked up from the healthcare proxy. Mom, this is really thorough. When did you put all this together? This week, after I realized that your concerns about my future weren't going to go away. I needed to show you that I've thought about these things seriously and made responsible plans. Emma was reading through the advance directives. These are very specific. You've really considered all the scenarios we've been worried about. Of course I have. Do you think I've spent 68 years on this earth without thinking about aging and death? The difference is I've thought about them as things that will happen to me personally, not as abstract problems that other people need to solve for me. I got up to check on dinner, letting them absorb the information I'd just given them. The pot roast was ready, and the familiar ritual of serving food and passing dishes around the table gave everyone time to think. Okay, Sarah said, finally. I can see that you've been more thoughtful about this than we realized, but I still don't understand why you're so resistant to considering other living arrangements. Wouldn't it be easier to have support services built in instead of having to arrange them yourself? Sarah, let me ask you something. You have a nice house in Westerville with your husband and kids. It's probably more space than you actually need, and I'm sure it requires a lot of maintenance and expense. Have you ever considered moving to an apartment complex where someone else handles all the maintenance and you don't have to worry about lawn care or repairs? Of course not. That's completely different. How is it different? Sarah paused, clearly thinking. Well, we chose our house because we wanted space for our family, and we like having control over our living environment. And you're assuming that I don't want those same things because I'm older? Marcus jumped in. But Mom, you don't have kids at home anymore. You don't need all that space. I don't need all what space? This house has 3 bedrooms and 1,200 square feet. Your house, Marcus, has 4 bedrooms and 2,500 square feet for you and your wife. Should I suggest that you're rattling around in too much space? Lily laughed, despite herself. Okay, I see your point. But what about the maintenance issues? Doesn't it get overwhelming? Lily, you're 32 years old, and you called me last month because you didn't know how to reset the circuit breaker when your power went out. Do you think home maintenance skills deteriorate with age? Or do you think maybe I've had more practice dealing with household problems than you have? Jake was smiling now. Mom, I think what we're realizing is that we've been treating you like you're much more fragile than you actually are. That's exactly what you've been doing. And the most frustrating part is that you've been making assumptions about my capabilities without bothering to assess what my actual situation is. Emma put down her fork. You're right. We've been acting like concerned children instead of respectful adults. But Mom, can you understand why we've been worried? We love you, and the idea of something happening to you when you're alone is scary for us. Of course I understand that. But Emma, something could happen to me anywhere. I could have a stroke at Sunny Meadows just as easily as I could have one here. I could fall and break a hip in a retirement community just as easily as I could fall in my own house. The difference is that if something happens to me here, I'm in a place I chose, surrounded by things I love, in a community where I've built relationships over 15 years. Sarah was quiet for a moment. So what do you want from us? How can we support you without feeling like we're just waiting for disaster to strike? I want you to treat me like a competent adult who's capable of making her own decisions and asking for help when she needs it. I want you to stop looking for problems that don't exist and stop trying to solve problems I haven't asked you to solve. And what if you do need help someday? Marcus asked. Then I'll ask for it. And I'll expect you to help me figure out solutions that work for my situation, not solutions that make you feel better about managing my life. I got up to clear the dinner plates, and without being asked, they all started helping with the cleanup the way they had when they were teenagers. For a few minutes, we fell into the old rhythm of family dinner cleanup, scraping plates, loading the dishwasher, putting leftovers away, wiping down counters. Mom, Jake said, drying a serving dish, I owe you an apology. I've been so busy with deployment schedules that I just went along with what Marcus and Sarah were saying without really thinking about it. I should have talked to you directly. You all should have talked to me directly. That's what adults do when they're concerned about someone they care about. Emma was putting away the leftover pot roast. What happens now with Tom Henderson and the whole sale thing? Tom Henderson withdrew his offer when he learned about the land trust situation. Turns out he wasn't as interested in buying the house once he realized it would involve a complicated approval process and sharing profits with a nonprofit organization. Marcus looked embarrassed. We really didn't understand the ownership arrangement. No, you didn't. And you didn't ask me to explain it before you started making plans based on incomplete information. Sarah sat back down at the table. Mom, I have to ask, are you going to stay in this house forever? What's your long-term plan? My long-term plan is to live here as long as I'm happy and healthy and able to manage independently. If and when that changes, I'll reassess my options based on my actual circumstances at the time, not on hypothetical problems that might never develop. And you'll include us in those decisions? I'll include you in those decisions if and when they need to be made, but I won't have ongoing discussions about my future living arrangements just to make you feel better about uncertainties you can't control. Lily was wiping down the kitchen counter. That's fair, I guess, but it's hard not to worry. Lily, you can worry all you want. Worry is a normal part of loving someone, but worry doesn't give you the right to make decisions for someone else. And it doesn't mean the person you're worried about has to change their life to manage your anxiety. We moved back to the living room, and for the first time in weeks, the atmosphere felt more relaxed. They weren't looking at me like I was a problem that needed to be solved, and I wasn't feeling defensive about every question or comment. There's one more thing we need to talk about. The way you all went behind my back to research contractors, contact real estate agents, and set up meetings with retirement communities. That can't happen again. Marcus looked genuinely ashamed. You're right, that was wrong of us. It wasn't just wrong, it was disrespectful. You treated me like a child who couldn't be trusted with information about her own life. You violated my privacy and made plans that would have affected me profoundly without including me in any of the decision-making. Sarah was tearing up. We thought we were helping. I know you thought that. But help involves asking someone what they need and offering to provide it. What you did was decide what I should need and try to manipulate me into accepting it. Emma pulled out her phone. Mom, I think we should all exchange contact information for your neighbors and friends. Not so we can check up on you without permission, but so we know who to call if we're genuinely worried and can't reach you. That's a reasonable idea. Helen Rodriguez has my spare key, and she's usually the person who would know if something was wrong. I gave them Helen's contact information along with the numbers for the library, the literacy center, and my doctor's office. It felt good to be sharing information voluntarily instead of having them gather it secretly. One more thing, Jake said.
The way you all went behind my back to research contractors, contact real estate agents, and set up meetings with retirement communities, that can't happen again.
Marcus looked genuinely ashamed. You're right. That was wrong of us. It wasn't just wrong, it was disrespectful. You treated me like a child who couldn't be trusted with information about her own life. You violated my privacy and made plans that would have affected me profoundly without including me in any of the decision-making. Sarah was tearing up. We thought we were helping. I know you thought that, but help involves asking someone what they need and offering to provide it. What you did was decide what I should need and try to manipulate me into accepting it. Emma pulled out her phone. Mom, I think we should all exchange contact information for your neighbors and friends. Not so we can check up on you without permission, but so we know who to call if we're genuinely worried and can't reach you. That's a reasonable idea. Helen Rodriguez has my spare key, and she's usually the person who would know if something was wrong. I gave them Helen's contact information, along with the numbers for the library, the literacy center, and my doctor's office. It felt good to be sharing information voluntarily instead of having them gather it secretly. One more thing, Jake said. What can we do to help you with the house maintenance issues? Not because we think you can't handle them, but because we want to contribute to your being able to stay here as long as you want. This was the conversation I'd been hoping to have from the beginning. Well, those contractor estimates Marcus got were probably accurate. The roof will need to be replaced in the next few years, and the electrical system should be updated. If you want to help with those costs, I'd appreciate it, but I want to choose the contractors and oversee the work myself. That makes sense, Sarah said. What about regular maintenance? Cleaning gutters, trimming trees, stuff like that. I can hire people for most of that, but if you want to help with yard work when you visit, I certainly won't turn it down. Emma was taking notes on her phone. What about transportation? Do you anticipate needing rides to appointments or errands? Not anytime soon, but I'll let you know if that changes. And I'll research senior transportation services so I have options that don't depend on your schedules. We talked for another hour about practical ways they could support my independence instead of undermining it. By the time they left, I felt like we'd had the conversation we should have had months ago, one that acknowledged my autonomy while addressing their concerns constructively. The next few weeks were refreshingly quiet. No surprise visits, no new schemes, no contractors showing up unannounced. My children seemed to have accepted that I was staying put, and they'd shifted their energy toward finding ways to help that didn't involve controlling my decisions. Marcus called to ask if I wanted him to clean the gutters when he came for Thanksgiving dinner. Sarah offered to help me research home security systems, not because she thought I needed one, but because I'd mentioned I was considering it. Emma sent me information about estate planning updates, and Lily volunteered to help me organize my financial records. Jake, who was home for a few weeks before his next deployment, stopped by one afternoon with a toolbox and offered to fix a few minor things around the house. We spent the day replacing a leaky faucet, adjusting a sticking door, and tightening loose cabinet handles. You know, Mom, he said while we were taking a break on the back deck, I've been thinking about what you said at dinner that night, about how we were treating you like you were failing instead of recognizing that you were succeeding. And I realized I've been doing the same thing with my own life. Every time I face a challenge or a decision, I call you or Marcus or Sarah to help me figure it out. I haven't been trusting my own judgment. I smiled. That's different, honey. You're asking for advice and input, but you're still making your own decisions. There's nothing wrong with consulting people you trust when you're trying to figure something out. But you aren't even getting the chance to be consulted. We were just making decisions for you. Exactly. There's a big difference between asking for help and having help imposed on you. That afternoon, while Jake was fixing the cabinet handles, I got a phone call from Maria Santos at the Land Trust. Mrs. Sullivan, I wanted to follow up on our conversation from a few weeks ago. I understand your children have withdrawn their interest in selling your property. That's right. I've made it clear that I have no intention of selling, and they've accepted that decision. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
but I wanted to let you know about an opportunity that might interest you. We're starting a new program for our long-term homeowners, a kind of aging-in-place support network. She explained that the Land Trust was partnering with local service organizations to create a resource network for older residents who wanted to remain in their homes. The program would include everything from vetted contractors and housekeeping services to transportation assistance and emergency check-in systems. It sounds like exactly what I was telling my children I could arrange for myself if I needed it. That's the idea. We want to make sure our homeowners have support systems in place so they can stay in their homes as long as possible. And frankly, it's good for us too, because stable, long-term residents are better for the community than constant turnover. I signed up for the program and asked Maria to send information to my children as well. I wanted them to see that I had access to organized support systems, not just the informal network of friends and neighbors I'd been relying on. A few days later, I got a call from Tom Henderson. "Mrs. Sullivan, I hope you don't mind me reaching out again. I wanted to apologize for my part in the whole house sale situation. Your kids approached me because they thought it would be a good deal for everyone, and I should have insisted on talking to you directly before getting involved." I appreciate that, Tom. I also wanted to let you know that I'm still interested in investing in properties in your neighborhood. If you ever hear of anyone who is genuinely interested in selling, it's a good area with strong property values. I'll keep that in mind. And, Mrs. Sullivan, for what it's worth, I think you made the right decision. I've seen too many people get pushed into housing situations that weren't right for them. Your house is in good shape, you're clearly capable of maintaining it, and you seem happy there. That's worth more than any amount of money you might have made from a sale. Thanksgiving that year was different from previous years. All 5 kids came with their families, just like always, but the conversation was more relaxed. Instead of treating me like a fragile elder who needed to be managed, they talked to me like a member of the family whose opinions and experiences mattered. Marcus and his wife asked about my volunteer work at the Literacy Center. Sarah wanted to know about the books my book club was reading. Emma asked for advice about some legal research she was doing. Lily talked to me about balancing work and parenting like I was someone who might have relevant experience. Jake told stories about his deployment that included me as someone who would understand the complexities of military life. My grandchildren, who had been picking up on the adults' anxiety about my living situation, seemed more relaxed too.
Instead of treating my house like a place their grandmother was rattling around in alone, they treated it like what it was. Their grandmother's house, where they were always welcome and where she was clearly thriving. "Grandma," my oldest granddaughter said while we were making pie together, "my mom said you might move to an old people's place, but you decided not to. I'm glad because I like your house." "Why do you like my house, sweetie?" "Because it feels like you, and because you have the good cookies and you let me help cook and you have all those books." Out of the mouths of babes. My house felt like me because it was an expression of my choices, my interests, and my values. A retirement community apartment might be safer and more convenient, but it would never feel like me in the same way. After everyone left that evening, I sat in my living room looking at the family photos scattered around, the leftover pie on the kitchen counter, and the small pile of gifts my grandchildren had made for me during the afternoon. This was what I had been fighting for. Not just the right to stay in my house, but the right to continue being myself in a place that reflected who I was. The winter passed quietly. I continued working at the library and volunteering at the Literacy Center. I joined the Land Trust's Aging in Place support group and met other older residents who were navigating similar challenges with adult children who meant well but didn't always understand the difference between helping and controlling. In the spring, I hired contractors to replace my roof and update my electrical system. Marcus and Sarah contributed to the costs, as they'd offered, but they let me manage the projects myself. The work was done well and on budget, and I felt proud of having overseen it successfully. Emma helped me update my will and estate planning documents to reflect my new healthcare directives and decision-making arrangements. Lily started stopping by every few weeks just to visit. Not because she was checking up on me, but because she enjoyed our conversations. Jake called regularly from wherever he was stationed, and our talks were more like conversations between friends than dutiful check-ins between parent and child. Sarah took the longest to adjust to the new dynamic. She still worried about me, still occasionally made suggestions that sounded more like instructions than offers of help, but gradually she began to trust that I was managing my life competently and that her job as my daughter was to support my choices, not make them for me. One afternoon in late spring, she stopped by unexpectedly and found me in the backyard planting tomatoes in the garden bed I'd been tending for 15 years. "Mom, your garden looks amazing this year." "Thanks. I added a few new varieties I wanted to try." She sat down on the back steps and watched me work. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not just the polite kind we did after that family dinner." I sat back on my heels and looked at her. "For what specifically?" "For not trusting you. For thinking that because you're my mother, I had the right to make decisions about your life. For assuming that getting older automatically meant becoming less capable." "Thank you. That means a lot. I think I was scared that if something happened to you, it would be my fault for not forcing you to move somewhere safer. But I realize now that was never my responsibility. You're a grown adult who gets to make her own choices about risk and safety and what makes life worth living." I stood up and brushed the dirt off my gardening gloves. "Sarah, can I tell you something? Even if I do eventually need to move to assisted living or a nursing home, it won't be because I made the wrong choice about staying here as long as I could. It will be because circumstances changed, and I'll make a new choice based on new realities." "And we'll help you with that choice when and if it happens?" "You'll help me with that choice when and if it happens." That evening, I sat on my back deck watching the sunset over the neighborhood I'd chosen as my home. Mrs. Chen was watering her flowers across the street. The young family next door was pushing their toddler on a swing set in their backyard. A jogger went by on the sidewalk, followed by someone walking their dog. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening in late May, and I was exactly where I wanted to be. Not because staying in my house was the objectively right choice for every 68-year-old woman, but because it was the right choice for me based on my values, my circumstances, and my assessment of what would make me happy. 6 months later, I'm still here, still working at the library, still volunteering at the literacy center, still hosting family dinners, still maintaining my own home, and making my own decisions. My children have settled into a new pattern of treating me like the competent adult I've always been, and our relationships are stronger for it. I don't know what the future holds. I might stay in this house for another 20 years, or I might decide next year that I want to try something different. But whatever choices I make about my living situation will be mine to make, based on my own assessment of my needs and capabilities at the time. The land trust ownership arrangement that my children saw as a complication turned out to be one of my greatest assets, not just because it protected me from their well-intentioned but misguided attempt to sell my house, but because it connected me to a community of people committed to helping residents age in place successfully. I learned that independence doesn't mean refusing all help. It means maintaining the right to choose when, how, and from whom you accept help. I learned that loving someone doesn't give you the right to make their decisions for them, even when those decisions involve risks you wish they wouldn't take. Most importantly, I learned that aging doesn't have to mean surrendering control over your own life. It can mean making thoughtful choices about how to maintain the things that matter to you while adapting to changing circumstances. It can mean building support systems that enhance your independence rather than replacing it. My house on Maple Street is still small, still needs occasional repairs, and still requires me to navigate those supposedly dangerous basement stairs. But it's also still mine, still reflects my choices and values, and still provides the foundation for a life I've chosen, rather than one that's been chosen for me. And that, I've discovered, makes all the difference in the world.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.